I'm going to talk about how to create your own pet portrait that is similar to the style that you see in this image. This is a piece of artwork by Mark Tatro. And what I want you to notice when you look at this is there's a solid background, and the outline of the pet is appears to be a black line. In fact, there appear to be wavy, um, variable thickness black lines in this image. But I want you to think about the elements of graphic design. And one of those elements is line, but another element is shape. These elements are often in our heads. They're imaginary. We see things in the world and we interpret them as lines, shapes, and those interpretations often become lines, shapes, forms, colors, and things that we place in artwork so that other people, when they see our artwork, they see lines, shapes, forms, and they see what we're trying to represent with those things. So for a moment, think about the lines that you see in this image, and then think about the shapes and the way they interact, and the way that these may not be lines at all, but instead may be shapes with other shapes drawn over or within them. For example, look at the outside of the dog here. All around the outside is what looks like a black outline, but imagine if that outline were just a big black shape that someone had placed these other smaller shapes into. Okay, that's another way to look at this, and it's the way to look at this that I think will be helpful if we want to reproduce something like this in our own work. So I'm going to go into Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to make it letter size. Actually, yeah, I'll make it letter size. Let me change the size of this. And I'll create it in RGB color mode. I'll say, here's my document, my new document. And I'm going to do view, fit, artboard, and window. Okay. So now I'm going to choose a drawing that I'm going to use as the model for my artwork. So I'm going to go to under File and choose Place. And this is a puppy that I'm going to use in this artwork. So I'm going to drag and place the puppy here and position it. On my document, it's in a layer called Layer 1. I'm going to rename this layer to Background. Actually, I'm going to rename this layer to Photograph because it's not going to be part of my final art. It's just going to be there for the to guide me in creating this art. And I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm not going to name that layer just yet. And then I'm going to lock the background layer so that it can't be dragged. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I want to create a shape that is similar to what we saw here, all around the outside, something that goes all around outside of the edge of the pet here. Okay, so I'm going to use the curvature tool because that's my favorite tool for drawing curves and paths. I'm going to set the fill to none. And I'm going to set the stroke to a bright color just so that I can see it, just this blue. Then I'm going to use, I'm on the Windows machine, so I'm going to hold the Alt key down, and I believe the Option key will do the same thing for you, and I use the mouse button to zoom in and out. All right, so remember, I want to make this curve, this path, be on the outside of Winnie here. This cute puppy is named Winnie. So as I click around, I'm creating a shape that is outside of the outline of Winnie. So this is going to be a shape that is bigger than Winnie, because the shapes that make up her body are going to have to be within this shape, and I still want the edge of this shape to be visible. All right, so there's the outline, and it is right now it's not filled in, but if I fill it with black, and get rid of the stroke and just hide the background just for a moment, you'll see that I have a shape outline that may remind you a little bit of the outline for here. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another shape here in order to make it a little bit clearer what I'm trying to accomplish. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to change this and this. I'm going to select these two objects. And I'm going to go into properties and fill them in with white. So maybe a grayish white. And then I'm going to eliminate their strokes so we can see the shapes. Okay, and what I hope you can see when I zoom out is if I turn on the black outline now and I get rid of the background layer, looks like I went a little bit out of the lines here, so I can fix that. But hopefully what you can see is that there's a space between the outside edge of the shape that where I trace the edge of Winnie and the black edge of the outline shape, okay, which creates an impression of the body there, if that makes sense. So here I've worked a little bit more on this version of this image, and so hopefully you can see that I've got some shapes that correspond to similar colored areas, or areas of continuous color or near continuous color. And then most of the time, the border between these areas, where the areas are spaced apart a little bit, the black object from the background is showing through. And then in some cases, I've layered some objects on top of other objects without having a space between them for the black objects, as in the case of the eyes and a little bit around her nose and mouth, because the layering gave me a feeling of depth that I didn't have and without that. And I wanted to show that this was in front, but also didn't want to make it look like a completely separate piece. Okay, there's going to be some artistic choices you make if you do this this project, and that's going to be up to you. I would start by planning to make all of the shapes that you put inside of your other shape to separate shapes. Okay, just as you see in this work where all the shapes are separate. Okay, because that has a really nice look to it. However, if you're having trouble getting those shapes to look like what you feel representing your pet or your animal, it might make sense to, within some of those shapes, layer on top of them a smaller shape that is in a contrasting color and use that effect to also get some layering. And that's how you emulate this style using shapes to get a picture of a beloved pet.